Okay, and we're live. Welcome back, y'all. Hey, Uni, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Omi. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So glad to welcome our classmates back to Earth School Journey again this week. We got started last week with our month's theme on ritual, and today we're going to dive a little bit deeper. And I'm just really excited to be here, really happy to be here.
Same.
So I'm going to start this off with a quote from the book called Ritual by Malidoma Somé. Where ritual is absent, the young ones are restless or violent. There are no real elders, and the grown-ups are bewildered. The future is dim. And that came from a book by the name of Ritual by Malidoma Somé. If you don't know who Malidoma Somé is, I highly suggest you look him up. um, and this quote just really stood out to me because I feel like it is the outpicturing of our life in this moment in Western culture in the US specifically. Um, I don't know if there's anything you want to, any comments you want to make about this quote right now, but I'll give you a second to respond if you like.
Thank you. Yes, first of all, I immediately ordered that book as soon as you mentioned it the other day because I'm like, yes, yes, and yes. And like you said, I feel like that quote is essentially the story of my life. You know what I mean? And I'm
Mhm.
sure that a lot of people can relate. And as we move from, we were children, now we are the parent, in the parent phase, and as we go into the elder phase, I really want to make sure that, I know for myself that I'm being intentional about that to shift the narrative so that hopefully the next generation doesn't have to, or maybe they can't relate to that quote. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think it's a very, it's just, it's just a powerful quote,
Mm,
and to realize that I can relate so much to that. It's like, no, I don't want anybody else to be able to relate to that after me, if I
right.
could help it.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love for it to be more like a comment on historical events than necessarily the, oh, wow, this is our world right now, as it is right now. This is our world, you know? Our young ones really are restless and violent, not necessarily always outwardly violent. And although they are a lot of inwardly violent, there's a lot of depression and anxiety and self harm and things like that of various kinds, addiction, all of that. Um, all that rings to me as violence, against self often, but there's also, between each other that there's a lot of violence. And this that idea that like there are no real elders, yeah, I don't yes, we have people who are older than us, but we don't have elders in the sense of those people who we respect and look to for guidance. And honestly, as the grown up, I am a little bewildered. Especially thinking about the fact that I'm about to be in the, I mean, not about to be immediately, but like I'm moving into that stage of becoming an elder. As my children age into adulthood and become the grown-ups, and I will transition into becoming the elder. And I don't anywhere near feel prepared for that. There's no initiation, there's no like, yeah. So let's dive into this topic. Let's just dive right in like we usually do. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is, what exactly do we mean when we say ritual? What are rituals, and how is that different maybe from public opinion or kind of how media puts it out there? But Uni, what is your interpretation of what we mean when we say ritual in a spiritual sense?
Yeah, for me, ritual on any scale, whether it's personal, whether it's, familial with my family, whether it's with my community or society, I think it's when intention meets action, when we set an intention to do something for a purpose, and we do that thing so that we can essentially be more present, or we can go through a transition, or we can celebrate something, or we can, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, there's just so many different reasons for ritual, but I think the core of it for me is, that intention and that action allowing us to really um, to um, to help us be more sacred and live a more sacred life, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that resonates with me a lot. It's the bringing that presence into your life, bringing the presence and the intention into just everything, and I think that rituals are more than just like your routines. They're more than just like necessarily your practices. Your practices can be ritualistic. You can have rituals, that are practices. Um, but it's really taking a moment to stop and honor and acknowledge a transition, a anything honestly that needs that moment of being honored, that needs that moment of recognition, that moment of gratitude and embracing of what's coming or what's been, and so I think ritual is like that. It's kind of the hinge, you know what I mean, between just living life and not knowing and just kind of floating through and taking that time to stop and acknowledge, this is my life. This is what's happening right now. This is what's come before. This is what's coming next, and honoring both sides of that. Um, and so, um, like I mentioned, I think it's more than just a routine necessarily. And so, one of the things that we wanted to explore was the difference between a ritual and a routine or a habit or a compulsion, which is something else that we talk about a lot when it comes to ritual because of kind of the public face of ritual is always something not so fun, right? It's not a very good, there's not shown in a good light. You think of rituals and you see movies, and there's never really a ritual that's presented in a movie that's like a good thing, right? They don't ever call it that. If they do, they'll call it a tradition. They'll call it which those can be rituals as well. But it's interesting that those things seem more compulsion than necessarily, I get to do this. I'm something like that. So there's a lot of aspects to this right here. But first, let's start with the difference between a ritual and a habit or a routine. What do you have for us on that?
I think that again, the ritual is like intentional, it's meaningful, there's a lot of awareness when you do it. You're honoring yourself or a transition, a period in your life. It's really symbolic for a lot of reasons. It symbolizes something, you know what I mean? It could
Mm,
be health, it could be wellness, it could be some sort of elevation, or again, some sort of transition. When it comes to a habit, it's kind of done without thinking. Like, you don't even have to think when it's habitual. You know what I mean?
mhm,
It's not in, you're not honoring what you're doing. You're not taking a moment to reflect. You're just doing it. You're on autopilot essentially. And
mm,
a lot of our lives these days, we're on autopilot. You
mhm,
know what I mean? And I think that when it comes to habits, it's like I'm just trying to think of a habit. I was trying to think of a habit that like, okay, so even something as simple as like coffee. I think I made like a reference to it last week as well. So just to build on that, some people drinking coffee is like and even for me at one point it was like I gotta have my coffee. You know what I mean? Like if I don't have my coffee, it was just a habit. It was even like a compulsion almost, where it's like if I didn't have it, I couldn't start my day, nothing would be right. I may be snapping on people.
Right.
I may not even be myself that day. Um, but when I pause for a moment, what really made me take my morning coffee and took it from like a habit where I just like had to have it and I wasn't really thinking about it. Sometimes, at one point we were just talking about this earlier. I put sugar in it. I put regular milk. It didn't matter if my stomach was a little upset. I had to have my coffee, right? It was
Hmm.
a habit. It didn't matter what it was doing to me. I had to have it. When it became more of a ritual for me was one day I went into a corner store and this young woman, she put cinnamon in her coffee, and I had never seen nobody put cinnamon in their coffee before. Like I didn't. This was like going 10 years back now, but I had never seen up until that point. And so I was like, oh, cinnamon, like I want to try that. I think I had been drinking my coffee black. I was trying to actually start weaning myself off of the sugar and you know what I mean? I was making some transitions in my life at that time. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna try a little cinnamon in there. Tried a little cinnamon in my coffee and it just woke it up. It was just like, oh wow, you know what I mean? Like I'm like, wow, it smells really good. I never really cared for like the creamers and stuff because they upset my stomach. I don't really care too much for the creamers, but the cinnamon, kind of still gave me the flavor without giving me the upset, you know what I mean? Kind of,
Hmm.
stomach issue. And from there, I just started thinking more like, okay, so what can I do now, with my coffee? And so, it has changed over the years. Now I have oat milk, maybe a little ginger, some cinnamon, some cacao. It's like a whole thing, because I I've noticed someone else doing it, you know what I mean? And it became like a ritual for me versus like just this automatic habit. And now I can switch it up sometimes. I do it different. It's a little more healthier. I'm using either cinnamon sticks or maybe some organic cinnamon powder or organic ginger powder. Like it's more of a natural thing for me. You know what I mean? I don't
Hmm.
know if that's really a great example, but it did go from being habitual to being more of a ritual for me. And like before I take a sip, I inhale, it smells really good. You know what I mean? It's not artificial flavoring, it's natural, all of those things. It really helps me to be present and it grounds me in my day. And to be honest with you, if I miss it on a day or two here or there, my life isn't thrown off
Yeah.
either. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm not, oh my God, I gotta have it. It's really not that. It's really not that. And sometimes, like I said, I leave the coffee out. I switch it up depending on how I'm feeling for the day. I'm really more present in the morning with what I need versus just pouring a cup of coffee and throwing in some uh what do you call it, creamer and sugar or whatever.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if that helps, that's my take on it. What about you?
So I think I glitched out for a second there.
Oh, okay.
Um, well, what I was thinking of when you were saying all of that about the morning coffee is it made me think of as you drink your coffee.
Hmm.
What it made me think about was how prayer before a meal has become habit. You know, it we think of it as a spiritual practice or something, but I think for a lot of us, especially those of us who grew up saying prayers before we ate, it was more like you got in the habit of doing it so you didn't get yelled at, right? So you just did it. there was no intention, there was no like real presence or anything like that. And so it became habit, it became routine, it was just something you did, right? And then as an adult, I re-examined that practice because I realized I had literally just gotten to the point of where I would like bless it. You know what I mean? Like just so I was doing it because, as an adult, you still have that, voice in the back of your head of a parent going, you have to say grace. You have to bless your food or whatever, right? And so now as an adult, I've been able to reconnect with that practice and make it more into a ritual of bringing presence, bringing spirit into it, like not just saying bless it, but taking a moment to really connect with the fact that this food was provided for me, that it, blessing those who were involved in the preparing of it, the growing of it, blessing the plants and the animals themselves. And it just allows you to be more present with what you're eating. And I think it allows us to like take those things more seriously so that we're not just ingesting, you know what I mean? Just taking things in, which is kind of what you mentioned with your coffee of like, oh, now I can be more intentional about this. It really is, I think, the difference. And we're talking about a daily ritual here. I mean, this is a small thing. There are much bigger rituals that are also important for things that we're overlooking. But this is just one small example of like the difference between a routine uh, and a ritual, or a habit and a ritual. I think something else, like on a bigger scale, that we just kind of do as routine is like graduation, high school graduation. Our kids graduate. It's just routine. It's just what it is. There's no, we have a ceremony, but there's not a lot of presence. It's a lot of let's get through this. So we just got to get through this. You know what I mean? But there's not a lot of in the moment of recognizing, how far you've come, of really taking a minute to bless what was and what's coming, and really, go through that transition. I feel like, especially with bringing a spiritual presence into it, there's none of that in most graduation ceremonies now. Even if there is any mention of prayer or God or anything like that, it's done more in a routine, habitual kind of way, because we're also so worried about being politically correct. You know what I mean? Like those things just can't seem to be recognized in a public setting. And I do think it's a shame that we don't have that, in some of these just habitual routine things. Like graduation is a routine thing, prom is a routine thing. Um, when you get to be an adult, you have a baby, that's just a routine thing. We don't really celebrate these transitions as and it's not just about the celebration of them, although that is a big part of it, the celebration of it, but it's also the honoring of it. Ritual allows us to honor it, to be present with it, to respect this, the loss of what was and the welcoming of what's coming, and acknowledging that there may be some, hesitation, and that there may be some missteps along the way. And it's kind of, so it's more than just, okay, great, check, next step. And I think that's the biggest thing with whether or not it's a habit or a ritual or a routine versus whether or not it's a ritual. Okay, I think it just started raining or something.
Oh wow.
Just out of nowhere. And the other part of that is that compulsion, right? We talked a little bit about this this idea that in media it can be portrayed as something, rituals are kind of portrayed as a bad thing because they're compulsory. You have to do them, they have to be done in a certain way, and that they're often like hard things to do, or something like that. And the other way in which this shows up is they talk about rituals with OCD. Do you have to have rituals in order to do this? Like that's kind of on the checklist of questions that they ask you. Do you have to like touch something 4 times before you close the door? Or, you know what I mean? Like, do you have to do this in a certain way? Do you have rituals that, around that? And those I don't really see as rituals. Those are compulsions. That's something that's completely different. And I don't want us to confuse this idea of ritual, which is a beautiful sacred, practice, with something that is used to control or used to like satisfy a nervous system thing that, because of a loss of ritual, essentially, these compulsions, I feel like, are often in place of ritual. They aren't the same thing. So I'm going to turn it over to you to see, what do you think about that, about these compulsions?
Yeah, I think compulsions are driven by like anxiety, and I think that it's driven by that need to, like you said, like this need to do something or else nothing can be right. You know
Right.
what I mean? Again, like I said before, if I don't have my morning drink, it doesn't mean my day is gonna go to HE double hockey sticks. You know what I mean? I can still have a great day. You know what I mean? Maybe I decide to have tea today instead of that. So I think that it's anxiety driven, and when I think about when you were mentioning like with the movies and stuff, one of the things that came to mind was a lot of times like the what they portray as rituals are often like these weird like sacrifices. You know what I mean? More like a sacrifice where they're doing something nefarious to get some sort of result. You know what I mean? And I think that it's unfortunate that it is a lot of times like portrayed in that way because like you said there's so many beautiful rituals out there. One of the ones I had mentioned the other day was in Black Panther. They have that ritual where whenever King T'Challa, he had this ancestral ritual where he would go under, and then he'd have his ancestral council, and they would give him guidance and tell him what he needed to do, and then he'd come back up, and now he was ready for war. He was ready for whatever needed to be done, and I think that that's that's kind of like the flip side of it,
Mhm.
whereas real rituals prepare you for the next stage of life, or the next, whatever you're transitioning to, versus those other ones that are like you said, they're like control based. They're trying to get an outcome. They're trying to, you know, um, force their will on someone or something in order to achieve whatever result, versus something that is going to help the community, help, you know what I mean? It's kind of like the opposite of what we've been seeing. You know what I mean? We've
Mhm.
been, we see what the Ouija boards and all that sort of stuff. Like you said the other day, you mentioned like the star on the on the floor. They draw the star. They got the candle. Like that's not necessary. I mean, that can be a ritual for, a certain group. But I do think a lot of times those are compulsive compulsions or compulsory. I don't know if I'm saying that word right, but because they're trying to force something. You know what I mean? They're not preparing for something. They're not preparing for a celebration, or preparing for a transition, or preparing for, like you said, a birth, a graduation, an elevation, or anything like that. And I think you make a good point about the graduation in terms of it's just something that you kind of like you get through. And why is it like that? Because you got to work 40 plus hours a week to pay your bills. You're stressed out. You got to go grocery shopping. You only got 2 days out the week to you know what I mean, kind of relax and run your errands and do everything that you need to do. So we don't really have the time or the energy to put forth for these real transitions in life, to send our children off into the world in a better way. Yes, it would be beautiful if we had some sort of a ritual that prepared for the graduation or prepared for that transition. But it's like we're just being pressed and you. I mean, I mean, if you're looking at the grocery circular, trying to figure out how to save money because everything is so crazy now. You know what I mean? My whole point is that we just we're not afforded the time to really be present with these moments.
Hmm.
And it's really unfortunate, and it's like they're squeezing us more and more. You got gas is gone up now, and it's just so unfortunate.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I one of the things I wanted to point out about rituals is that, I think where people get it confused and where it becomes this compulsory thing is where when the older generation is like it has to happen this way.
Oh yeah, that
You have
too.
to do these things. You have to, you know, and then it also becomes this kind of like superstition thing where like if I don't do it, if you don't do this, your next stage of life is not going to go, it's like you were saying where you're like with my coffee, like, oh, I don't have my coffee, it's going to be a bad day. Yeah, no, it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. I think that certain rituals should be, not all, but certain rituals should be non-negotiable in that they have to happen, but the timing of them necessarily, or the like order of service, you know what I mean? That those are things that we need to bring the younger generation that's going through these into, and have it be full of meaning for them. For us as the ones going, whoever it is that's going, the initiate or the rite of passage or the ritual is for, we need to bring our newness into it. But these things do need to happen, and yes, there are traditions that are followed through, but they can't be so inflexible that they become a compulsion, that they become like an edict that just it has to happen. I think that's when it starts to feel religious and cultish, or you know what I mean, those types of things. It doesn't feel genuine, it feels forced. Like there needs to be ritual in the ritual itself, this embracing of the new, but the honoring of the old, and that needs to be true in the ritual itself. So that's just what was coming to me as you were talking about that. um And I love that. I love the reference to to Black Panther, because what a beautiful example of a positive ritual, you know,
Hmm.
a beautiful ritual. And I feel like one of the reasons why that movie specifically like speaks to so many, particularly people of color, like that it brings that part of our culture back. I know I'm Puerto Rican, and there's so many rituals and things that we have lost as a culture, because the Tainos were nearly like, just completely eradicated. And so it's the same in, Black culture, African American culture, however you prefer to relate to it. But that the traditions were just lost, the rituals were lost, and all of it was whitewashed into like Christian, nothing wrong with Christians in and of themselves, but let's be real about what history did. you know,
Yeah.
let's be real
Yes.
about what history did. Love me some Jesus too. Don't feel bad. Like I'm not trying to like say anything bad about
Yeah.
Christians in and of themselves, but that's what happened. Is everything just it had to be in this specific way. This
Right.
religious doctrine, like dogma, and like that's not what it's about. Ritual is not about that. It's
Right.
about, you know, allowing yourself to let go of what has been and embracing what is coming. And being present and intentional and in the moment with it. It's I think it's twofold. It's both of those things. That intentional awareness, and it's an opportunity to let go and embrace the new. Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
definitely a flow that you have to get into, as you're speaking, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing the rigidity versus being in a flow. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And we talk all the time about being human beings or spiritual beings having a human experience. The human experience is the more mundane, it's more Saturnian, if you will, time and space and all that stuff. But the spiritual part of us is more. it's getting into a flow. It's following your intuition. It's understanding, what's going to be best in this moment. Understanding if, like, we mentioned, um, I think, I know we mentioned maybe last month or the month before, just being in tune with your intuition. So when something opens up, to go this way, or to go that way. You know what's going to bring you the highest good of what it is that you're looking for at this time, or what you're trying to achieve at this time. And what may have been, I don't want to say appropriate, but what may have seemed right last week, this week maybe there's something else, you know what I mean? So staying open is the key. And that's the thing that, that's the way that I think a lot of the previous generation of elders has lost us, is the lack of openness. Everything was so rigid, so closed down, so,
Mhm.
like you said, you just have to do it that way. And we're just like, but why can't we change it a little bit? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? There As we are upgrading our lives, we have cell phones everywhere. We practically live on them. You know what I mean? There's Wi-Fi all over the place. There's all these different things, there's just so much technology, and it's like, but we're not going to upgrade our spiritual technology. We're going to
mhm,
just stay in the stone ages with that. No, we
right,
have to upgrade our spiritual technology as well. It's all in alignment. You know what I
mhm,
mean? Because, to be honest with you, the man-made technology is mimicking what we're doing anyway. You know what I mean? It's mimicking our sense of direction. It's mimicking our ability to connect. It's mimicking our ability uh, uh, to use telepathy and teleport, all these different things. This is what technology is doing. And so if we don't allow space for us to open up and elevate spiritually, then technology can't grow,
right,
but as far as we go,
right,
because it's here to help us. So, I mean, it's just something to think about. And again, I'm glad that we are stepping into the stage of being the new elders, because I think that while we do understand that, yes, there's a time and a place for everything, yes, there are certain markers that you should have, you know what I mean? Like, maybe there's the opening, there's a closing, you know what I mean? There's an honor, there's different parts of a ritual that you should have, but the expression of that
right.
can be more open, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so I'd like to move on to discussing rituals as a lifestyle thing. Like, how do we incorporate this into our lifestyle now in this day and age? Like, what comes to me when I think about rituals and our current lifestyle is like, how do we find space? How do we find space? And it's easy to find space when you're doing it, as a personal ritual. And I believe that there's value and necessity for personal rituals. But one of the really big benefits of ritual is done in community is that you get that sense of community, that you don't feel lonely, that you have support. And so, our current lifestyle in a communal setting is it's not built for these things. So how do we move into making space in our lifestyle as a an individual but also as a community? And you have any thoughts on that? Because I'll be honest, I need ideas.
I think it's a challenge. Again, everybody is so busy. You know what I mean? Everybody has their own things going on. Everyone has, stress. They're trying to figure out how to make ends meet. There's really a lot. People are fighting a lot of silent battles. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And a lot of times people have gotten into communities, they've gotten into environments, they've shown up, they've done their thing in, sometimes, in church. You know what I mean? Maybe they've gone to work in different environments. They've shown up and they have felt either unwelcome, they have felt disrespected, disregarded, neglected, all of these things. And so if you somebody like me, you're like, listen, if every time I show up in wholeness or to try to be in wholeness, I'm gonna get some nonsense, I might as well just do my own thing. At least I
Mhm.
have peace. At least I have, with me and my immediate family, at least I know we good. You know what I mean? We may have our stuff, but you know what I mean? It's when you get into when you try to bring people on board and they're coming with pain, they're coming with hurt, they're coming with insecurities, they're coming with things that they don't even want to acknowledge to themselves, much less admit to you or me. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And so it's a challenge. I don't know how to get over that. I'm just telling you what I see from my point of
Right.
view. I think that a lot of things is like really kind of like putting it out there up front and like letting people know like, hey, listen, we all have our stuff, we all have our things that we're going through, but when we come to this space, it needs to be in wholeness, it needs to be a safe container, we need to have, as we started off last year talking about spiritual etiquette. Here's some guidelines for spiritual etiquette. If you really want to be in community, these are the standards that we are all going to have to uphold so that we can be in community and so that we can leave, you know, or not leave it behind, but really overcome some of the hurt and the pain that we've been through that really make us not want to even try. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I think that's really a big part of it, to be honest with you. I mean, and it's not just my own experience. I've seen so many other people go through similar experiences where it's just like, it's just always something. And then we don't have leaders who are in tune enough to help us because they got bills to pay, they got children to take care of, the gas, they try to put gas in their car, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's everybody is being pressed and we don't realize that we're all in the same boat, and so a lot of times we kind of like take it out on each other, we project on each other. I'm just a really big champion for people like taking responsibility for themselves. And yes, I have some blind spots, and I'm like, when I'm in community with people, hey, listen, if anything comes up, let me know. I do have some blind spots. I want to be in wholeness. I want to do my best. If I notice that I'm neglecting something, I'll speak about it to try to help me move past it. You know what I mean? It's about really being honest, and a lot of times people don't want to be honest. Instead, they want to point fingers and do all of that. And so I think it's just hard to really get people to come into the space with wholeness, or for them to come into the space without what they can get out of it. You know what I mean? Everyone's an entrepreneur. People join communities and circles and things to sell their products, to, you know what I mean? When
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that on the, if that's your long-term goal, but in the short term, if we're going to be community, you can't look at me as a customer right off the bat.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean? So there's just a lot of different things that I see. And I just hope that, by being honest, that we could really start to, make some changes and just understand that, yeah, we've all been through a lot, and we can definitely show up in wholeness as long as we hold ourselves accountable. We could do anything. So
Mm.
yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. As you were speaking, what I was thinking was that I think some of the answer to this is really starting young.
Yeah.
Like as parents, having these rites of passage and these rituals and these ceremonies with our children, and as we become the elders, having them with our grandchildren.
Hmm.
And really um, trying to set those things in motion from younger, you know, and then maybe, retroactively having those ceremonies for ourselves, like going back and having, I've heard of these things before. I've never really investigated them, and I think I probably will now, but where, older women, adult women go back and have like a rite of passage for becoming a woman, for puberty, like that, to acknowledge that transition, or going back and having the ritual, or the ceremony around becoming a mother, and just like retroactively kind of having some of those ceremonies. And I'm wondering if that's where we start with like recreating this as a lifestyle, of bringing it back into this culture. Definitely starting with the younger ones, because what honestly, they're the ones right now who need it. To because they're I feel like our youth are they're just not anchored anymore. And these ceremonies and these rituals allow us to anchor them into community, into a sense of I am supported, and I'm not just out here floating, in the wind, and I every man for themselves, and that sort of attitude. And I just wonder how much of this, bringing this in this transition into going back to having more ritual, but a more expanded version of what a ritual is, like you say, an upgraded version of that technology, you know bringing the youth into the building of these new rituals. you know what does a ritual look like for you as a teenager who is about to, become an adult and go out into the world, leave the protection of your family's home, all of that. Wait, what do you need right now? In a ceremony, what do you need? Do you need, like if you think about baptism, how you have godparents who like dedicate them. Well, you're a baby, you don't know any of that. You don't know that till you're an adult. You know what I mean? You don't know that till later. Oh, these are my godparents. But if you had a choice going into adulthood to maybe have those godparents rededicate themselves, or picking new ones that you can pick on your own, asking, specific people, like what do our younger generation need as they make these transitions, and how do we incorporate that into the rituals that, and these rites of passage that are missing from our community. So I'm I'd like to come up with ways to do that, because I would love to have some of these things with my kids as they're going through them right now. I mean, I know you're going through a graduation soon, and I've got a daughter who's going to be graduating soon. I got one who just graduated. And how do we best support our kids, and do we provide these ceremonies and these rites of passage for them now? you know but that's what was coming to me as you were saying some of these things. It is harder to do it with the adults, with the community that we're in now, because they're so set in their ways. So maybe what we need to do is kind of rededicate ourselves to our youth, who
Hmm.
need this and who can, grow up with it in a way and carry it into their adulthood, and then they will approach it differently than our peers right now.
Yeah.
you know
I agree with you. I just think that it's definitely we have to figure out how to lead by example as well to some
hmm
degree though. You know what I mean?
hmm
It's like they say a teacher can they can teach but they can't do the job. Like a coach can't really play basketball like the players play. That's what I've
yeah,
heard anyway. Unless
yeah. I
unless you know what I mean, like maybe unless they're like a retired coach or a retired player or something like that. But I just feel like maybe that's not really the best example, but I think that like figuring out how, even if it's just with a small group, and then yes, we invite people who would love to see their children um to to have a different legacy, a different, leave a different legacy for their families. But there has to be some sort of of a demonstration for them
Mm-hmm.
to, you know what I mean, for them to even kind of like get it, you know. Um, it's and I think that's the problem, that because we have spiritual communities out here, you know what I mean? You have so many spiritual communities out here. Um, but the problem is that the leadership isn't leading by example, and that's why it's falling apart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna name all the different ones that I've seen and, you know, been around, but I have yet to see any that are like really long standing, that are able to bring the young, because let me tell you something about the young people. Now, I know when I was young, I saw a lot of the hypocrisy of my elders. You know what I mean? They didn't like that, but I saw it. Um, and the thing is what the children say now is like, well, if it's like, if you're not even doing, how's it going to help me? You know what I mean? They want to see results. They want to see how it's, you know what I mean? So not to knock anything, but it's just thinking ahead, like really thinking this through in real time. It's like we have to figure out how to lead by example,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just with a select few. That's
Yeah.
what I feel.
Yeah, I definitely think that some of these like I was saying, like retroactive ceremonies, like, and having our
Mhm.
children be a part of that, or at least witnessing it, not necessarily be a part of it, but witnessing it is important, and then being able to provide those things for them in a way that works for them, not in
Mhm.
a way that works for us, but in a way that works for them,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
is important. I think it
yeah.
also, one of the things that I really feel about these rituals and rites of passage is that, like, it allows each generation, each segment, of the population to kind of know where they are, their road, like mile markers and things like that. Like, you know, I think it's very hard for our kids to be kids and not worry about adult things, because there's not a lot of delineation between childhood and adulthood anymore. Kids don't feel free to be kids because at a very young age they're being forced to take tests and prepare, and oh, college, college, college. We're talking about college in middle school now. Like, it was never like that when we were younger. You know what I mean? And yes, you have to prepare for the future, but there's also this distrust of adults. They don't trust adults. Like you said, there's
Yeah.
not a lot of leading by example, you know.
And what I meant really is like the community aspect of it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like I could do a ritual all day, but if I can't get along with, you know, the person sitting next to me, then it's like, you know what I mean? So that's
Mhm.
really, I just wanted to make that clear, that I was really talking about the community aspect of like moving forward with it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So yeah,
Yeah.
that was really all.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like, there has to be a sense of community to have a community ritual.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Exactly.
that's the thing is, we don't even know our neighbors anymore. We've talked about this many a times. Like, we don't really even know our
Yeah.
neighbors anymore. We don't have that community. And so we need to be building on community. And I think, these rituals and rites of passage and things like that are part of that. You know what I mean? Like, there will be a greater sense of community if we bring these things back.
Mm.
And a lot of repair needs to be done in our own spirits, and collectively. you know you can't know how broken you are until you interact with other people. You don't know how broken you are until somebody triggers you and you go, ooh, that hurt, why? And you look at it and you examine it, because yes, it could be that they specifically did something to hurt you, but it could also be that you're drawing that into yourself because you're unhealed in that way. You know what I mean? And so, anytime something's unhealed, something's just going to keep picking at it until you go, let me fix this. And relational communal wounds are like so deep, especially when it comes to religion. Especially when it comes to religion, it really is. And family, these family wounds go real deep. you know we know that. You and I specifically know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just something we're gonna have to continue to work on, and bringing these changing our lifestyle overall to include ritual.
Hmm.
You can't have a collective and a communal ritual with no community. No, you can't. I mean, not and have it not be um a negative experience, because I feel like having a community ritual when the community is broken is not a positive experience. It's not going to be a
Yeah.
positive experience. You may just suffer through it to get through it because you feel like it's expected, and we don't want that either. That doesn't mean intention. That doesn't mean awareness. You're not recognizing spirit. You're not honoring what was and bringing in what's new. You know what I mean? You're losing all of that if the community itself is broken.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So that's a really great point. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
Let's see.
you.
We are at 51 minutes already. Jeez. Oh my gosh, it's gone so fast. I still have so many more things, but I guess we'll just have to bring a lot of this up next week. Um, I think the last thing we can get into the importance and stuff, I guess, next week, because I don't think we have enough time to talk about that in just a few minutes. But rituals as spiritual practice. I think we've talked about it a lot, as far as incorporating it into lifestyle and it being like a transition. But I think the spiritual aspect of it is really what's missing, because we have a lot of traditions and we have a lot of ceremonies and we have like all these things in our culture, but they are not spiritual practices. And so if our rituals are not a part of a greater spiritual practice, what purpose do they really serve? At least that's my thought around that. Um, what what do you think about this as rituals as a spiritual practice?
Well, I think it's one of the oldest forms of spiritual practices. You know what I
Mm,
mean? I think that a lot of spiritual practices revolved around rituals, connecting us or connecting, I want to say them, but I also want to say us as the human race to the spirit world, to our spiritual selves, to the oneness, to the most high. And what I feel like it does is, when you connect in a spiritual way, you become receptive. You know what I mean? You become open. Again, we talk about the rigidity and how when a lot of times people don't realize is when you're so closed off that you don't allow room for spirit to come in and work. You know what I mean? That's you're kind of like cutting spirit off,
yeah,
really. You know what I
right.
mean? Because the spirit can move through you, the spirit can move through me, the spirit can move through anyone. And so I feel like as a spiritual practice, it opens us up to receive. Like you don't know how many times, especially lately, as I'm getting a little older, it's getting a little more challenging for me to do some of the things that I could before I just get up and do whatever. Like if I had a goal, I just do it. If it was losing weight, if it was going to the gym, if it was eating right, whatever it was, I just do it. Now I'm moving a little slower. I have a lot of reasons to stay in the bed. I have a lot of reasons to not go back out. First of all, gas is high. I don't want to try. You know what I mean? Um, but I kind of lost my train of thought. See what the gas prices are doing to me. I was saying that I've been calling on spirit to to move through me in the best ways. You know what I mean? Help me have the right thoughts. Help me have the right words. Help me have the right actions. Help me, you know what I mean? calling on the Most High to move through me in the best ways. And I feel like as a spiritual practice, what those rituals did is they filled you up with the spirit so that you could live a healthier life, so that you could go through this next stage with a more at a higher vibration, because we know the higher your vibration, the quicker you're able to manifest, the you know what I mean, the more
Hmm.
in tune, the better your crops come out, the better they taste, the better they look, the you know what I mean, you have
Right.
more yield and all that good stuff when you're at a higher vibration. And so that's really what I felt, what I feel rituals of spirituality is it opens us up to receive just the highest good for ourselves, from, be it from that, that getting the most out of that last phase as we move into the next phase. And this is whether we're praying in the morning for, thank you for waking me up, that I slept well, that I'm well rested, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Maybe to when I'm even going to sleep at night. Thank you, thank you for this day. You know what I mean? Like, I
Hmm.
feel like that spiritual aspect, it just really opens us up. And a lot of times too, it fills us with gratitude, which is one of the highest vibrations also. So I think it's just a lot of things, but the most thing is just that receptivity to spirit, and allowing us to just really tap into the oneness that we are all connected to anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I feel like ritual allows us to remember that we are these spiritual beings having this human experience, and to bring
Mm,
that into each stage of our life, into each transition of our life, to remember that part of being human is constant change, but
hmm.
that this, the spirit part of us is unchanging.
Yeah.
That spirit part of us is always, it's always good, it's always strong, it's always, the part of us that connects us to eternity, that connects us to God, that connects us to the universe, however you like to call that, the most high. It reminds us to remember that, and to remember that this life is a journey, and we are
Mm,
moving, that we're constantly going through this, and that, yes, you might have to let go of a stage, but the eternal you is still there. You're not really losing anything. You're just embracing this next experience that your soul wants to have, that your spirit wants to know and do, and so you can honor what was, and honor what's coming, and honor what is and always is. And it's just like, I think they all really are marriages, no matter what, you know, whether it's a marrying of the old and new, or two people, or, spirit and body, or whatever, that is. But all of these rituals really are just opportunities for us to remember the truth, to know it. Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. I do. It reminded me of like just that kind of like that revelation I had last month about the stillness. When you were talking about, what always is, and you know what I mean, like that place of us that is always constant. Like there's that stillness that it helps connect us to and ground us as we move through the
Yes.
transitions. I love that. Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much for that. That was beautiful.
Yes. So we are just about done. It's time to wrap up. I know last time we were supposed to make a little bit of an announcement about something we have coming. We are working on something called Earth School Mini Lessons, and they are going to be these little short teachings on different practices and rituals and principles and experiences and things like that, that we can just learn really quickly, or refer back to. They're going to be short little 5 to 10 minute videos, with a teaching, and then another 5 to 10 minute video with a practice that goes along with that. Maybe more. We may have more than one, but we're aiming for about 2 a month. And there's going to be an introduction coming out soon with more information about that. We just wanted to put all of our classmates on, notice that that's coming forth, and we're really excited about sharing this with you guys, right?
Mhm.
Anything you want to add about our mini lessons?
No, I'm just really excited to expand our channel and bring more to the people, and hopefully it'll help expand our community as well. So yeah, I'm really excited for the mini lessons.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's all we really have time for today. I am just so grateful for each and every one of our classmates who's out there who's watched with us today. We haven't really had a whole lot of opportunity to talk to you guys from here in the chat, but we're definitely in the chat talking to you guys right now, and probably have been this entire hour. Uni, anything you want to say as we wrap up?
I just want to thank you all as well. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for, just going through this journey with us as we are being guided to share, these lessons with you all as we are learning and growing. And, we just want to remind you to continue to be guided and continue to be supported by the Most High, and may you be reminded of who you truly are, as Umi just you know just reminded us. Yeah, thank you all so much.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Until next time, peace. We bless you.